As early as I can remember, I knew Jesus, and I knew he was God's son. But when I was of an age to choose, I believed in him, but I didn't really follow him. I wanted freedom and independence. I spent over 30 years like that on the fence, coming and going from church and prayer for years at a stretch. But when I did decide to follow him and give my life to him and do his will, there was and is so much joy. I didn't lose freedom, I finally gained it. What I did lose was old pain and guilt and a lot of fear. I went from knowing God to having a loving relationship with him.
Prior to bringing Jesus into my life, I had a tendency to blame everybody and everything for all that had gone wrong in my life. Through his teachings, I learned that it was my responsibility to use my mind, body, and spirit in a positive manner. Also, over the last year, I've had to deal with my wife acquiring Alzheimer's disease and our daughter-in-law becoming terminally ill with breast cancer. Without constant communication with Jesus through evening prayer, I could have easily gone over the deep end. Life is very complicated, and praying to Jesus has given me strength to make good choices.
Before Jesus was in my life, I was in a place of guilt and shame, but he freed me. Does that mean that he freed me from all my sin? That I never sin? No. At times I still fall into sin. I still feel despair, like a prisoner. But with Jesus, I've been freed from my chains, chains that I put on myself. I've learned to forgive and to let go of my guilt. Through him, I've learned to not give up on myself. Because of him, I have a reason to not give up on the world, but to love this world. If I didn't have Jesus in my life would be meaningless. But I do have Jesus in my life, and because of that, I have been set free.
I always knew God, but unfortunately I would only turn to him whenever it was convenient for me, whenever I needed something from him. And then I finally realized a few years ago I was out of excuses why I wasn't practicing my religion, wasn't going to church. So I made a valiant effort to come back to church, and in doing so I finally experienced God's family at church, and it's allowed me to really learn and grow in my faith and find Jesus as a friend who wants us to know him as much as he knows about us and bring our problems to him. And in putting my faith back in God, it's allowed me to get rid of a lot of my minor stresses that I don't need to worry about. And it's also let me find more compassion for people, especially the homeless, whom someday I would like to be able to share their stories.
Alright, so growing up in Christian schools all my life, I had accepted Jesus at a very young age. Being a Christian always meant being pleasant and happy and saying my prayers at night, because that was kind of the thing to do. So, but in my recent struggles, I've found that sometimes relying on your own judgment and even sometimes relying on the judgment of people around you is not sufficient. So once I truly accepted Jesus in my life, I had conviction and a deep-seated sorrow about my sin. And after placing my entire faith in him, I started to see everything from my life in a different perspective. And I had felt joy. Life is still a struggle and far from perfect, but Jesus gives me hope and joy in my life.